It is September 7, 2025, and this is episode 31. And the other night I discovered that the internal audit manager for the city of Cincinnati has issued a new report. She issued it on August the 13th, dealing with the lead service line replacement program. And the audit looked at the program. It's been in place since 2018. I think the auditor looked at the last year of operation, or the operation of the program in the last year. It's a 20-year program, and so far we're in year 7. Yeah, we're in year 7, and there's been 7,500 lines replaced. It doesn't say how many feet that is, and we don't know how many pounds those pipes weighed. Both of those data points are important for another part of the contract that was being audited, and that is that the contract was set up so that the city would get a cut of whatever the value of the recycled pipes or the scrap pipes were. But instead, the audit had two main findings. One is that an employee of the city, the in-house lead crew working for the city, an employee of the in-house lead crew misappropriated, quote unquote, the scrap lead pipe for personal gain, quote unquote. But there's very little information about the scheme, who all was involved, how it was executed, nothing like that. That may be, hopefully that is in an internal investigative report that the waterworks conducted. The dates of the investigation weren't provided, but the program goes back 7 years. And I don't know how long the contract has been in place. I don't know if it's a follow-on contract or the original contract. We don't have that contract file either, and the audit report doesn't really elaborate on that. But the reason that this is important is because not because of any necessarily deficient aspects of the report, although there are some. What's noteworthy here is that it doesn't look like the city really cares about, the audit findings. If it were up to me, I would take findings like this. I'd bring the internal audit manager and her audit team. I'd bring them into a city council meeting, and I would commend them because they are out there finding weaknesses in the city's operations that could amount to a lot of money. And just to give you a comparison, before I go on too long here, just to give you a comparison, the city of Cincinnati's got a $2 billion budget. They raise and spend $2 billion a year. And they have 4 auditors. I think there's 4 auditors plus the manager. So she may be a very hands-on type manager, but compare that to the Civilian Complaint Authority. They have 11 investigators for the Civilian Complaint Authority. And if you've ever looked at the caseload, and this podcast isn't about the Civilian Complaint Authority, but I'm just comparing the attention the city gives to its money and the efficiency and effectiveness of their programs versus how many resources they apply to the police oversight. And if you ever looked at their caseload, a huge percentage of their cases are either no findings or some, failed to follow procedures or some very minor finding. But they have 11 people on staff working on those things. And if you remember the videos of Iris Rowley strolling around and inserting herself into a police business, and she's talking about it. I've got a list of employees, and she tells the member of the public, If you don't like this police officer, you need to file a complaint, because if you file a complaint, I can get that police officer on my list. So she's going around generating business for her civilian complaint authority, which she basically bosses around, is probably the best way to put it. Meanwhile, you have billions of dollars going out the door, and you've got 4 little auditors trying to track it down. That should be inverted, in my opinion. But anyway, I'm kind of off track. So the one finding is this misappropriation. You don't know a whole lot about it. And the reason you don't know how much was misappropriated is because even though the city's contract with the recycle company requires that the city get a cut of whatever the value of the pipe is, the city put nothing in place to track how many pipes, how much they weighed, how much they were worth in recycling. They didn't set any of that up. And the container that the in-house lead crew was supposed to put the scrap lead into hadn't been serviced for 5 years. So you got 5 years of missing lead pipes. What happened to them? Were they all misappropriated, or were they on the side of the road? Which is interesting because Amber Cassim, the president of the East Price Hill Improvement Association, EFIA, sent me a picture of, I think she was out looking at sidewalks, and she actually sent me a photo of these lead pipes just thrown on the side of the road. And I think she was looking at the sidewalk issues, but she noticed these lead pipes. So when I told her about this lead pipe audit, she pulled this photo up. And if this is what the city was, how they were dealing with scrap lead pipes, yeah, you can see how they got misappropriated. So anyway, I thought that was very, very telling. So those are the 2 big findings. 1, there was a misappropriation, and 2 is that despite the contract, the city had no way to figure out how much lead pipe got recycled. By weight, by foot, nothing. And there probably are ways to try to track that down, either based on the data of the homes that got their pipes replaced, or go around the scrap yards and try to get any records of people that were recycling lead pipes. My guess is that it was, there was probably some, I don't know, conspiracy, if you want to use the proper term, to recycle these pipes or to scrap these pipes and get the money for it. There has to have been cooperation between some people. You can't have some guy coming in to your recycling outfit with all these lead pipes and you just scrap them without any questions. And who knows? I always thought that the police kept a pretty good eye on scrap yards for that reason, but who knows? Anyway, those were the 2 issues: the misappropriation and the lack of record keeping to determine compliance with the contract. So what ChatGPT did for me is, after we figured out best practices, we put it in a chart. We being me and ChatGPT, we put it in a chart side by side to give you an idea of what the comparison is. So this is the current practice versus the best practice. So the pickup schedule for the recycled scrap: no schedule. Container idle for 5 years. Should have been regularly serviced. No reconciliation. Logs and reconciliation by supervisors. Invoices, all metals lumped together. So I guess the contractor doesn't distinguish between a type of metal, although that seems kind of odd because, for example, if there's aluminum, or I think the different types of metal have different values, but I think that would come into place especially if you're under a contract and you have to give a cut of the value to the outfit you're working for. Anyway, all the metals were lumped together instead of being reported separately on invoices, and nobody was following up. Nobody was measuring the success or progress of the program, at least not in terms of what's happening with these lead pipes. So in terms of the findings, they're very, very good findings, but there's no follow-up. And the city has a requirement that the internal auditor do a follow-up audit every 6 months, or 6 months after they issue an audit. I think that's a little soon myself. I think I would follow up maybe in a year. But anyway, we'll see whether there's any kind of follow-up audit. I don't think that's universally accomplished. And then we'll go from there. The other thing is, the other thing that is particularly bothersome is that you hear the city council just complaining and complaining about how we need money, we're going to raise taxes, we got to, we have more nonprofits that we have to give money to. But you have audits like this or contracts like this, and nobody's paying any attention to it. And then you get audit reports that said there's a loss of money here. We don't know how much. And nobody on city council is pounding the table saying, hey, wait a minute, we're owed some money here. Just like with that Ready audit, I went down to the city council and I said, how can you, and the Ready was on the list to get leverage support again. And it's like, how can you give them more money when your auditor's telling you that they're unauditable and there's a $14,000 shortage? How can you approve another year of funding when the auditee or the grantee has problems like that? It didn't matter to them. So Ready got this. I think they might have got like $5,000 less or $10,000 less out of 60, or I forget how much money Ready got from the city. It's probably like $100,000. But anyway, this is going to be the same thing. The city council is not going to say anything. And these reports, the city council should view the internal auditor as their best friend, because the city auditor is going to tell them whether the programs that they're funding are working or not. But I don't see any connection like that. I don't see any connection between the council's business and the internal auditor's business. And what really I'm concerned about is that I'm wondering if these reports are formatted the way they are and have the lack of detail that they lack because the city manager, the city mayor, the city council, they really don't want the public to know about all the weaknesses in their processes. But they have to do audits, so they did this audit. It turned out to be a very significant audit. Even though the audit report doesn't make it look like that, it is a very significant audit. But you don't know whether that's what's going on here, or whether they just don't know enough about how to report out on audit results, or how to make significant findings that a legislative body like the city council will pay attention to and take action on. That's what I mean. They ought to pull this audit team into city council and thank them for their work. So let's move on real quick. I don't want to spend all day on this, but let's move on real quick to what the costs look like. So this is something that ChatGPT came up with. Again, it's not that great because we don't have a lot of detail, but I'm not sure if this is going to be on your left or your right. So this is my left. So the chart on your left. Anyway, one chart is the annual scrap value, and the other is what it would be over 5 years, and there are different variations. One is, first they set the value of scrap lead between 40 and 45 cents. And that's based on what ChatGPT found in the market review that they did. So if the pipes are 60 pounds a line, then the value would have been somewhere under $50,000, say 40,000 maybe. If it's 80 pounds, if the pipe was 80 pounds a line, it would be 45, or it would be 50, just about 50,000. And if the pipes weighed 100 pounds, then it would be up more towards $75,000. And that's for 1 year. So even if this employee absconded with the lead pipes for a year and scrapped them at 40 to 45 cents a pound, he could get, $40,000. And that's a lot of money. In fact, that $40,000 is pretty much the same amount that P.G. Sittenfeld got when he bribed, what's his name, the ex-Bengal player, or was bribed by the ex-Bengal player working for the FBI. If you take it over 5 years, now you're really talking some money here. And the reason we use 5 years is because the audit found that container that was set up to dispose of the lead pipes was in service for 5 years. So under the contract, the contractor or the in-house lead crew was supposed to put the scrap lead in this container, which was at the Waterworks headquarters apparently, and then the contractor, the recycle contractor, would come down and pick up the container, I guess, and replace it with a new one, but it hadn't been serviced in 5 years. So now you're looking at 5 years, and again, without knowing the weight of the lead, you're seeing that a reasonable estimate would be like $350,000. So we know it's somewhere between there. And without the data about exactly how many pipes there were and how much they weighed, we don't really know what the loss was. All we know is that there was a loss. And that's the significance of these charts. I know they don't tell you what the loss was, but what these charts tell you is why the internal auditor and the city should be making an effort to determine exactly what the loss was. And they can either go back to the individual that stole them and try to get the cost recovered, or they can go to the contractor for not fulfilling their contract. You would think that if the contractor is supposed to come down and empty out that container every so often, and they don't do that, and they don't report, to the city that, the container's been empty for the last couple of years, there are problems all around. And my guess is that it's just too much work, that the city, and this, I believe this wholeheartedly, that the city, let me get rid of this thing real quick. The city, I think they look at that kind of leakage and that kind of loss as the cost of doing business, that it would cost too much to go back and try to find out how much we lost. Well, in my mind, there's this talk about flipping the natty. I think the natty has to flip their attitude towards oversight, because in their minds right now, it looks like corruption and misappropriation and the loss of money that they shouldn't be losing, they think that's just the cost of doing business. We're just going to go on, and we're going to lose some things, and some employees are going to steal some part of our, money and that type of thing. But it's just too much trouble. It's the cost of doing business. Well, they need to flip that. Instead of saying that corruption is the cost of doing business, they have to reach a place where they believe that that oversight is the cost of doing business. That what it costs to properly oversee all of these operations and all of these spending, that's what they should be doing. That's the cost of business. You have to work in the cost of oversight into the money that you're spending. And for example, obviously they think that the cost of overseeing the police department, no matter how big or small the allegations, obviously they believe that that is worth it, that it's worth spending, I forget what their budget was. It's at least a couple million, I believe. I could probably reach something and find out right now, but you get the point that they're not properly using their audit function to try to recoup and save money. What they want to do is they want to sell the railroad, they want to sell the waterworks, they want to raise your taxes when they could be recouping or identifying a lot of recovered costs if their audit program was more robust. So to me, that's why this audit is so important. It is a blatant example of how lax the city is and how uncaring, or they're kind of ignorant to what is going on with these contracts and with the city operations. I've never heard them say a single thing about how, weaknesses or anything like that. And so if you tuned into the last podcast where I talked about the Cincinnati Futures Commission and how it's the biggest benefit in my mind was that it was kind of like a risk assessment. They don't do risk assessments, but this is a risk to the city that they're leaking money. And just imagine 200 nonprofits getting $20-something million from the city, and the only oversight they get is they get an internal audit coming around once every, several years. And, that's basically it. That is a risk that you have all this leakage coming out. They have no idea what's going on with all the money that they give these nonprofits. And that needs to change. So when you flip the natty, I hope you flip the attitude that the cost of doing business includes oversight instead of corruption and misappropriation and theft. So that's and contract fraud basically is what you're dealing with possibly if the Coen brothers were involved in this scheme. But we'll never know, and they'll never look at it. I probably am going to request a copy of the Waterworks investigation. I looked on the city site. I looked on the Waterworks site. They don't post any of that stuff. I'm sure the parts of the report, they may not want to identify who the culprits were or who the subjects of the investigation were, but there should be other information that they can release, and I'd like to see it to see how bad it was. But don't expect the city to release it on their own. And I could go into that some more too, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I think what I'm going to do is I am going to, first of all, I'm going to put up here, if you have this, all these documents will be on my website, cincinnatiwatchdog.com. This is the site. It's this report right here, this blog post right here. The internal audit manager is on a hot streak. That's where you'll find a copy of this audit report. Of course, you can go to the city's website and get a copy of the report if you're interested. But this will also have, the photos and the graphs and the tables that ChatGPT came up with. And I think I put an executive summary up there. But anyway, so that's on my blog page at cincinnatiwatchdog.com. And then I am going to leave or sign off with a visual that I asked ChatGPT to come up with as well. Here it is. So until next time.